Hey folks, this is Shetz, and this is page 28. We're going to be doing trapezoids and kites, and the only thing we'll do today is you'll need to watch this Edpuzzle video, but we are on handwritten page 28. So a trapezoid is a quad with one pair of parallel sides. Notice that the top and bottom are parallel. So those parallel sides are also called the bases. And I know you're used to seeing this at the bottom, you think bottom, but also this segment up top here is also called a base. So it has a base 1 and base 2. The non-parallel sides, these are called the legs. They're the legs right there. And guess what? It has two properties. Well, you know that these top and the bottom, the bases are parallel. There you go right there. And these consecutive angles are supplementary. This angle and this angle, because they're same side interiors. And then same with these over here. This top angle and this angle, they're also supplementary because they are same side interiors. Does not have a property 3. Isosceles trapezoid. Well, just like an isosceles triangle, isosceles trapezoid, the legs happen to be congruent. So notice this leg and this leg is congruent. It's a trapezoid, but the legs are congruent. Now, isosceles trapezoids have two particular properties. They have the two properties above, but also that the diagonals are congruent. Do you know what figure also has congruent diagonals? Think about it carefully. That might be a question. And base angles are congruent. Now, we know down here's the base and up here's the base. Well, just like an isosceles triangle, we have base angles congruent. As also up here, these base angles are congruent, and it still had the previous property right there that this orange, and this one, these are same side interiors, they add up to 180. And when it's an isosceles, the tops are equal, the big angles, and the bottoms are equal. So you'll see problems like that. Then we get to a kite. A kite is one that has consecutive sides are congruent. They're congruent, and notice these bottom ones are congruent. So these two are congruent, and these two sides are congruent. The diagonals, only one is being bisected. So this major diagonal right here bisects this little diagonal, so it's going to cut it in half. And notice I'm using 3 hash marks this time. But notice the little guy does not bisect the big one. It intersects it, but it doesn't bisect it, and we do have a right angle right here. Okay, great. And remember in the rhombus when the diagonals bisected opposite angles? So diagonals bisect a pair of opposite angles. The two top angles are congruent, the two bottom angles are congruent, and one more big thing that's important is this big angle, I have to use 3, is the same as this big angle. But this little guy does not bisect the big angle here. Only the top and bottom are bisected. So you need to go over this carefully and re-watch this video. Continuing on, here's a picture. And for those of you that have that learn by pictures, here's a quad, and this is what we did in the previous days. parallelograms, rhombus, rectangles, and squares. There you go. With quads, there's also another arrow coming out of it, and that's for the traps and the isosceles traps. There's a third branch that comes out of quads, and that's kites. So go back over those properties and look at what we've written down. Here's an example. Here's just a trap. So I would like to know what this angle 1 is right there. Also, tell me what angle 2 is. These are the type of problems that are going to be coming up. Well, one of the properties says that these two angles have to add up to 180. Well, if that's true, then this guy, angle 1, must be 80 degrees because we already have 100. And if this angle is 40, angle 2, they're same side interiors, which are supplementary, so angle 2 is going to have to be 140 degrees. So I'm showing you examples that you will be probably expected to do, not today, but on tomorrow's worksheet, and that's going to be a separate worksheet. Here we have an isosceles trapezoid. I forgot to write it, but we know that these legs are congruent. We know that the diagonals are congruent. AC equals BD. And we also know that these base angles are going to be congruent. So this angle equals this one, and this angle up here equals this angle here. So there you go. That's just reviewing the properties. I didn't put any numbers in. Now, if you recall, a few months back, we did mid-segment of a triangle, and that's this blue line, the blue segment. Notice the blue segment goes to the midpoint. This is a midpoint because these two pieces are equal. Same thing on this side. These two little pieces are equal, so this has to be the midpoint. And if you recall, the mid-segment is half the third side. So if this is x, this third side is double it. So this mid-segment would be half of this segment, the third side. We also know that the mid-segment is parallel to the third side. Well, we have a mid-segment of a trapezoid. And look at the definition here, folks. It's the average of the bases. So, top and bottom, when we add them up, guess what? We're going to get the mid-segment. Add them up, average, add them up and divide by 2. Oh, I almost did a baddie. So we have to add the top and the bottom up and divide by 2. Sometimes it might be given like this. If this is 12 and this is 15, the same thing we did when I did the midpoint of an ordered pair. How do you go from here to here? Oh, that's right. We add 3. Add 3. Well, guess what? Why don't we add 3 more? Guess what y is going to be? A grand total of 18. That's right, folks. Okay, let me get rid of this a second. So I did the top and bottom, the yellows right here. We would just add 10 and 20, divide by 2, you get 15. Here, we add 3 more, you're going to get 18. And sometimes, maybe you're going to have a problem where the big piece and then, the big piece and the mid-segment is given. So how do you go from a 7.5 to a 5.5? You do what? Oh, that's right. You subtract 2. Well, then when you go from 5.5 to z, just subtract off another 2. So now we move on to kites. And here's an example that I just put up for you guys. Let me just move that down just a hair. There we go. Now remember, in a kite, we know that the diagonals are perpendicular. Therefore, we're probably going to have to use Pythagorean theorem. 3, 4, and guess what x is? Well, if you didn't know, here's my work for it, a 3, 4, 5. And let's not forget y. If this is 3 and this is 10, now this example was real nice because it was a triple, but this example is not, so you're going to have to use your Pythagorean theorem. Take a minute and tell me what y is. And if you didn't get the answer, here's the work. 3 squared plus 10 squared is y squared. 9 and 100 is 109. Taking the square root of 109, you do get a 10.44. And again, since I have this up here, I know that this angle is going to be congruent to that angle. I know this angle is going to be congruent to this little one here. And then this diagonal here, this diagonal, the major diagonal cuts these angles in half, top and bottom. But now this huge angle, BAD, is congruent to this angle here, BCD. And I'm sure you'll be given problems like that. Let me put my right angle in here. And there you go, folks. There's a kite. We did some examples. You'll have examples like this to do. Not today, but tomorrow. And I will send you a separate sheet for that. I know this was a lot, so just answer the questions that are in the Ed puzzle. As you go through it, you can see what the answers are. Take it easy tonight. Try to remember these properties. Trapezoids, isosceles trapezoids, and also kites. Have a great day, folks.